Hey everyone, I am going to paint a window and a countertop with some basil plants on top and a bowl with a couple of mini watermelons. This is not something I paint often, so if I am a little quiet at times, it's probably because I'm concentrating a little more than I need to do when I paint flowers. I'm going to cover my canvas with teal and white. I'm using a 10 by 10 canvas, and I'll list all of my paint colors and supplies below the video. I'm using my normal colors if you follow me on here. Primary magenta, turquoise, teal, Hansa yellow, and titanium white. And I'm going to use some carbon black for my gray. This is just a thin 1/2 inch craft store canvas. But I'm going to cover the sides now because it's really a pain to do it after you're finished. I tried to film this tutorial yesterday, but I got so wrapped up in the painting that I forgot to turn the camera back on after my layers were drying. So hopefully I'll do a little better today. Just gonna wet my brush a little. It's fine if this layer is uneven. I chose teal, this light teal, because a lot of my canvas, a lot of my painting is going to be looking through a window here, and I'm going to paint some greenery. But I also want maybe to leave some teal showing through in the background. This way my canvas is completely covered and I don't mind this color showing through anywhere else, even around the flowers. That's usually how I choose my first layer. I know a lot of people start with reds and orange, but I don't think that would work well for this painting because I don't want any red or orange showing through in my window. Okay, I'm gonna let this completely dry. I'm gonna start with turquoise and white, and that's what I'm gonna use to sketch everything. I wanna get the proportions of everything down first. I'm gonna use a flat brush size 12. This is what I usually use for smaller canvases. So this part of the painting, about 3/4 of my painting, is going to be window. Don't worry if your lines aren't straight. This is going to be the window pane. In the middle, this will be the shadowed piece of wood, so it's going to be a grayish color. And then the wood on the sides will be a little more highlighted. And then there'll be another shadowed area. Hopefully that'll be clearer as we go along. So this is going to be my window pane. And then this is going to be my wall here, and there's going to be a shadow from the window. That comes down, and then the wall will be a little bit shadowed. And my basil plant is going to throw a little shadow on the wall. So I guess the bottom of my window will be around here. There's going to be a window pane. And then my plants are going to be here, and I'm going to have a bowl of watermelon here. So let's see, my first basil plant is going to kind of come down like this. I think I'm going to make it a little bigger. And my second basil plant is set a little behind it. Maybe a little bigger. Okay, and don't worry about how rough your sketch is because you're going to paint over it anyway, so you can always resize things as you go along. It might be really helpful for you to take a picture of one of your own windows or go on Google or Pinterest or something and find an image that you can look at for reference of windows and plants. I made a little sketch from a bunch of different images that I was looking at, so I don't have one single reference photo to show you, but there's tons of beautiful images online that you can get inspiration from. I think I will start to take some of my own photos so I can share them here with you. All right, so the bowl with the watermelon is going to go off the side here. There's going to be an angle, and the bowl has a little bit of a foot. And then these are going to be mini watermelons. The watermelon in this bowl is not going to be the focal point of the painting, so don't worry too much about getting them exact. They're just going to be details that are there, but not something that people are going to be drawn to at first. Okay, so this is sort of the wall, right, and it meets the table about here, and I have some tile which may or may not show up later in my final painting, but I'm just going to add it in as detail right now. So this is the wall meeting the countertop at an angle. This is going to be my shadow. This is my wall where the sun is shining in, and then my window panes are going to be either white or gray, depending on if the sun is hitting that area or if it's a shadowed area. Looking out the window, I'm going to have a lot of trees. The only thing I'm going to be mindful of is my basil plant. I want to make sure that you see the basil leaves, not completely blended into the background. So I might make the foliage in this window a little different than the colors I'm going to use for my basil. There's a tree out my window, which I'm not sure if I'm going to leave in. I had it in my original sketch. And I just had a bunch of leaves, almost like a vine, and then some darker trees in the background. So I'm going to slowly just start to work on my layers now. I like to start with the darker areas. So I'm going in with turquoise. Having a bunch of turquoise in the windows is going to help to draw your eye back. It's going to add depth to your painting. So definitely put some either darker blue or dark turquoise in your windows. It's probably a good idea to start very thin and just build up the layers. And you can always do different brush strokes too. You know, you can go up and down, side to side. It'll just make your windows more interesting looking. mixing some yellow right on top of my turquoise to make some green. I'm just going to sprinkle some lighter green. I guess this is really a darker green. Put a little bit of it here. I'm going to kind of go somewhat dark to lighter with my values. And then you'll be able to see my basil a little better. I like this color for the watermelon, so I'm gonna just put a few of my watermelon stripes in. So that's the sort of the side, the middle of the side. I'm gonna go over these a bunch of times, so they're probably gonna look rough in the beginning, but that's kind of how everything with painting kind of works. So that will be the little stem, and then now what I'm going to do is just keep adding more yellow and white to my palette to make a bunch of different shades of green. And I'm just going to keep layering my windows until I'm happy with them, which will probably be, knowing me, 2 or 3 times. So I'm gonna go a little lighter, lighter, lighter as I go down. That's a really dark green. Just trying to define my windows a little more. I'm gonna try to carry everything over to the sides so that my painting won't need framing. It'll look finished. I'm just trying to, like, I'm not trying to be exact. I just kind of want like a representation of leaves, I guess. So just make a bunch of layers, overlap, have some things going in different directions. All right, some downward brush strokes, some upward brush strokes, and then you'll just get some good variety. And if you don't like it, let it dry and paint over it. I'm going to do a little more in the windows and then I'm going to let them dry, and I'll probably go back and add to them. I want to make sure I have my dark because that is what is going to make my eye recede into the background. And then just a couple of light spots, and then I'm really going to stop and move on to another area of my painting. All right. Next, I am going to work on my windows and my wall and my countertop. I'm going to work with whites and grays and maybe some blue mixed in with my gray. So I'm using carbon black and my white, but I like a little blue mixed in. I like a blue-gray for shadows sometimes, so I think I'm gonna go with that to start with. You just need the tiniest bit of the black because it'll really give you a dark gray if you use too much. You can always darken or lighten as you go along. You don't have to get it perfect on the first layer. I'm just going to take a little of my turquoise and mix it in. And I'm going to fill in my shadows first. So this is the shadow of my window on the wall, and then a little bit of my basil plant with some shade on the wall. Painting most of this side gray. I'm actually going to paint it all gray. And then there might be a spot of white for the counter later, but let's start with gray. So my basil plant is going to cast a bit of a shadow on the wall. And it's going to shadow a little bit onto my tile. There's going to be light in here, the sun shining in here, but my plant is going to cast a bit of a shadow down in this area. Both plants, there's going to be shadows. And then with my bowl, the same thing. So from about the bottom lip of the bowl, we're going to have a shadow. And the shadow of the bowl is even going to be a little darker right underneath the bowl. So just pay attention to the lightness and darkness of your shadows. And that kind of follows the bowl shape. And then a little lighter underneath. I'm gonna go back and forth with white and gray for a while, just till I get my my bearings on everything. So we have sunlight here. Some of this is going to be covered anyway with leaves, so I'm not worried about being too exact. All right, there's going to be basil leaves there, but maybe a little sunlight pokes through. I just want to cover some of these turquoise lines from my original sketch. And then there's a bit of a shadow from the wood frame of the window. So I've got one clearly coming in this direction. Right, but then also this piece of wood is casting a bit of a shadow. And just with the side of my brush, I just want a little line of darker shadow. This is where the corner is. and then sunlight. I know that's hard to see. I'm going to go over it a few times to make the difference between the white and the gray a little more prominent. The windows take a while for me. So in the middle here will be some more gray. It's all right to go over the watermelon a little because we're going to touch up the watermelon again, and then that will be underneath. I put too much black on my brush, but I'm just going to blend it with more white and it'll be fine. I don't really mind if that shadow is dark. Gonna go gray. So I'm trying to do like a white gray, white gray. So the best thing for me to do right now is to let this dry a little bit, and then I'll be able to make my white stripes a little bit more prominent. But that's fine for now. Let's see, over here, so I have to do more of a gray stripe in here. All right, I've got some shadow. You can, if you want to make more detailed lines like that, just use the tip of your brush. Kind of dry your brush off a little and pick up a little paint, and then just use the tip. All right, I'm just gonna put a little more white on, and then I'm gonna let everything dry because I feel like I'm painting so many stripes I can't even see what I'm doing anymore. I need to step back and assess which parts need to be touched up and which parts are good. All right, I'm gonna take a couple of minutes to let this dry and then see what my next move is. All right, so it's mostly dry. I'm taking a clean brush to go over my white. That should brighten up my sunlight. I'm also happy that I chose teal as my underpainting color because it's working well in these little spots where I didn't cover the canvas fully. I like the little accent, so I would always try to pick a color for your underpainting that you don't mind or that you want it to show through a little in the end. So there's going to be a little sunlight between my two planters here. It's probably all dried up. I'm gonna add a dot of turquoise and a dot of carbon black. These shadows need to be touched up. I'm gonna add a little more turquoise. The difference is probably subtle, but I want my table, not my table, my countertop to just be a blue gray rather than a straight gray. And it's pretty shadowy. But then we get a little more sunlight. have these tile lines. Which I'm not sure I'm going to keep 100%. I might shade them a little. I'm going to do my bowl next. So this is the window pane. My bowl is a little lighter, closer to the rim, and then it gets a tiny bit darker toward the bottom, and then it's shaded more at the very base. And then the lip of the bowl should be a little bit darker. It's lighter as it goes in this direction. And there's a little sunlight shining on it, so I'll just put a drop of white, wipe off my brush a little. All right, this feels like a long process. Let's see. I think next we're gonna do the terracotta pots. I am gonna get a clean piece of palette paper and I'm going to make some orange with my primary magenta and my Hansa yellow. I'm going to put a little white because the magenta and the yellow are pretty translucent. And if I put the orange on the blue, you're going to see the blue through and it's going to be kind of ugly. So I'm first going to mix a peach that has a lot of white in it. And I'm going to cover all that blue. Don't worry too much about the top of the pot because we're going to paint some basil in there and cover most of it up anyway. Just get it to the point where most of that blue is covered with a pink or a peach. And it'll make your life easier for the next layer. So it looks ugly right now, but the next layer will look much better. While that is drying, I'm going to work on my watermelon. I'm grabbing a clean brush and I'm going to use some of this yellow. I just need a dark green and a light green. And if this is the kind of that center stem area of the watermelon, all right, the watermelon marks are gonna just kind of go out from that point. I am not going to get caught up in my watermelon at all because it's not going to be a focal point. I'm gonna grab some white. And a little more yellow. I'm going to add a little bit of my lighter green on the top because remember the sun is shining in, and so that would make the top a little shinier than the rest. You could darken them with a little, the darker ones with a little turquoise if you wanted. I'm going to make this one a little bigger only to cover some turquoise that I had there. A little sunlight on the top. All right, so I'm definitely going to touch up the bowl a little bit more, which I'm actually going to do now because my flower pots are still a little wet. So white, turquoise, so kind of a medium in the middle and a little bit of a highlight toward the top. And then a little bit of shadow toward the bottom. Right, the lip is always a little bit darker. And you can kind of blend that in as much or as little as you want. And there's a truck backing up outside. All right, that's fine. It's more blue than I wanted. Do these just kind of blue-gray shadows on the tiles. All right, now I'm going to go back to my terracotta pots. All right, so I cleaned a couple of my brushes and I've got a clean paper towel. My magenta is still wet. I'm gonna use some new yellow because I got green in there. And I'm going to mix orange. I'm going to make my terracotta pots darker than they probably are in real life, just because I like a nice pop of color in my paintings. So if you prefer muted colors, you can add a bunch of white. My pots have shadow and highlights also. So like the lip of this one is going to be a bit darker, and it's a bit darker along the back. This one, they're both going to be covered, the top part anyway, in a lot of basil, so don't worry about being exact, especially with the top part of your pottery. Bottom lip is going to be a little darker. darker under here. I'm gonna have sort of a triangular type shadow right here and right here. So these areas I'm gonna paint with a lighter peach color. And then I'm gonna get a little lighter on this side of the pot. Planter pot. I put way too much paint on my brush, so now I just need to correct that. I'm gonna go over that again with some dark in a minute. All right, and then we have sort of an angled shadow in here. Highlight, not an angle. The sunlight would be coming on this side, right? So it would be dark to light. And there would be a little bit of dark right under the lip. And then my highlight. So definitely not terracotta color, but you don't have to paint everything exactly the way it is in real life. This is what I like, so I like to just paint what I like with the colors I like. All right, I'm not going to worry about this middle. I mean, I'm going to paint a little dark in there in a few minutes, but I'm not worried about the lip here matching up because I'm going to have some basil falling down. And I'm going to paint the other piece of pottery. So the light is going to be hitting this side. I'm making it a little bigger because I felt like it wasn't really that straight looking. It's hard to tell from this angle sometimes. I'm going to give a little definition to the lip of the pot. I'm just going to use the very tip of my brush and a tiny bit of paint. Totally just fussing with everything right now, and I need to stop. Okay. These need to dry so that we can paint some basil in there. I just picked up a little black in case any of it shows through my basil leaves. I'll do a little blue black. But I mean, a lot of it probably won't, so. All right, time to dry. So I think that's dry enough for now. I just wanted to paint a little more white on here. I could continue with my shadows on the windows forever, but I won't. All right, that's it for those. I'm gonna mix some different shades of green, and I'm gonna start to add in my basil now. I'm just gonna wipe this brush off, and you know, basil leaves are just like little petals. You can overlap them. You can make lots of different colors. I'm going to start with some darker green ones and then add some that are more yellow green and maybe a little bit of blue as I go along. Any areas around the top of your pottery that you didn't like, this is a good opportunity to start covering them. I'm going to try to do different sizes also. So I'm putting one here that would be casting these shadows. And I'll put some going this way. And just keep going until you feel like it's full and overlapped and you have enough. Different angles too, like some should be kind of falling down, some can be facing more sideways. Depending on the color of the foliage in your window, you might want to adjust the color of your basil leaves. So maybe you do some darker basil leaves if you have a lot of light in your windows. I'm going to do some more darker ones. If I start to make them all the same size, then I usually will make one bigger, or I'll make a smaller one on top. You can even just fill in with some little dots in between, and they won't be noticeable really. If you just want to fill in like a white space. You could start making some little marks on them too, just to add some detail. I'm trying to make them look full, but I don't want them to cover every little spot. So I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of maybe the window pane and the wall coming through in the background. And they would definitely be overlapping with each other, so don't be afraid to overlap the ones that are on the other plant. I like that color, so I'm going to add a little over here. It doesn't have to be the color of basil, right? It's just a representation. Okay, so I am mostly finished, at least showing you how I do this, but what I do at this point is just kind of tinker with things that I don't like, or not that I don't like, things that need to be touched up a little. So I usually let it dry for a couple of minutes and then sort of walk away. Sometimes I move it across the room because you can get a better perspective that way. Sometimes I take a picture of it because you can see it clearly in a picture sometimes, more so than standing over it. So one area I identified that I want to touch up is this side of the pottery. I'm good with this one over here. Maybe just a little on the bottom, just to reshape it a little. I think that is a little better. And oh no. All right. So let's see. I'm going to just try to wipe that off with minimal damage. It's not that big of a deal because I can just paint over it. All right. That's what I get. I should have just left the painting alone. I need to let this dry, those areas dry. So while those are drying, I'm going to make sure my paints are not clogged like that one. And I'm going to just do what I was going to do. And then I'll go back and fix those. So I was going to take a little bit of my carbon black and my white. Well, I was going to touch up my white first. Just in the really, really white areas. For my highlights. And then I'm going to wipe off the brush so it's fairly dry. And I'm going to make some just kind of like scratchy kind of marks if I can in my shadows. It's definitely time to wrap this up because my neighbors are having their yard landscaped and it's loud. I'm squirting paint everywhere. I'm just fixing the shadows a little bit around my pottery because that's definitely casting a shadow. All right, let me attempt to fix the disaster. It's just gonna need a couple of layers of paint and it should be fine. I just grabbed a clean brush and I'm gonna go over that. All right. I hope you enjoyed my painting demo today. I'm going to be painting more of these because I'm finding them fun. Maybe different windows, different plants, maybe some different things in the background. If you paint one of your own, please tag me. I would love to see it. I'm going to link my Instagram and other social media below. Thanks for following along with me.